All right, the doors are closing, so I'm going to get us started. Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Benjamin. I write comics and video games. I did some stuff for Tokyo Pop, like World of Warcraft and StarCraft, and an original graphic novel series called Pantheon High. So plenty of manga, also lots of superhero stuff like Spider-Man and Wolverine, and all of the DC Comics characters in DC Universe Online. So lots of comic background, lots of character design background as a writer, but not as an artist. So I'm not the important one here, Ro is, because that's where you're going to get all the actual knowledge. But if you haven't checked out Half of the Crown, there are 16,000 plus people who have, which is a big number. I don't know if you know that. 16,000 is a lot, but it is. It is a shonen-inspired supernatural romance adventure with a girl with ghost problems. We've all got them, am I right? Ro does everything. She writes, she draws, pretty incredible stuff. And it's on webtoons.com and more importantly on Patreon. I say more importantly, you can be modest, but I'm going to say throw some money on Patreon.
My tiers are very low.
And also did character design for the board game Chibi Heroes. So I will get out of the way and I'll just pop back in here and there when it's time for like moderating questions and that kind of thing, so all of the drawing can happen without distraction.
Thank you for coming, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. My name is Ro Higashi. I'm actually a Filipino-American, but I married into a Japanese family. My husband and my daughter are right here in the front row. Say hi to them. And also, I've been working on Half of the Crown for the webtoon actually since 2008. It is the 8th reiteration of the same comic that I've been trying to start and restart, and I wasn't satisfied and I restarted, but this is the one that stuck, and I think this is the one that I'm going to end with. So, yeah, so I'm pretty happy about that. We put it into graphic novel format when I got picked up by an indie comic publisher called Cosmic Lion Productions in 2004 in March. And a year later, last month, we debuted the second volume. So yeah, this series is probably going to have a ton of volumes, and a lot of people ask about what it's about, and as you heard, there's just too many words to kind of condense it into one, but I've just kind of incorporated a lot of things from the culture that I grew up in. So for example, a lot of Filipino folklore, and kind of using inspiration from my friends to kind of bring my characters to life. So for example, one of the characters is really based off of an older brother figure, and I got his blessing, it's fine. But I think it's because I did something like that. I was trying to make, all of the characters not based off of real life people, because I guess back then they said, that would make your character kind of a Mary Sue. And I found that didn't happen once I finally tried to make it a little bit more authentic. So I hope you guys kind of gain some inspiration during this workshop to kind of have the courage to take what is your own experiences and to put your own twist on it and create things. Because as of right now, I'm going to say it's a lot of doom and gloom out there at the moment. But that's where you come in. That's where your work is very important. The stuff and the art and creativity that you put forth in the world will help everybody else. Because I truly believe that artists really do tap into kind of a universal energy. And once you put that to paper, comics are one of the most intimate things that you can have with your reader, because page by page they are looking at it, and we can only hope that part of that universal energy that we put into the comic also transfers to the reader. So it is doing the good work. So I wanted to talk a little bit more, before I talk about my art and everything, I kind of wanted to talk about the differences, and I hope this is not an uncomfortable conversation, about why does anime have big eyes? And I always think this question is a little funny, because we're also accustomed to DreamWorks animation and Disney and Pixar, and all of them unanimously also have, arguably, big eyes. But why is it that when we see anime, that's the only thing that we see? And I kind of wanted to talk about some things that we miss kind of as Americans or just as non-East Asians to kind of, I'm not East Asian, but I did live in Japan for a while, and you know, I went there not really knowing how to say something past like, I like to ski, which if you're trying to buy something, I'm not sure how that gets useful. But it's, you know, I had to learn really quickly on how to learn the mannerisms and see, you know, Japanese is very much a language and a communication style that is, you know, utilizing things that we as Americans don't utilize. And so what I mean by that is that when we talk, our whole face moves, we move our hands like this, sometimes we, you know, move our shoulders and everything, and that's considered natural. And I almost wonder if that's why a lot of people were very uncomfortable with the masks during COVID, because we kind of, you know, removed 50% of the communication there. And I think as Americans, you know, we feel a little bit uncomfortable when the whole face and the whole body isn't utilized. So when you watch anime, you'll see that most of the expression is in the eyes. And I think what a lot of people miss is that if you go to Japan and you talk to someone, and I'm not talking about from Japanese drama or anything, because since it's Japanese drama, it's like, you know, exaggerated in the same way that our dramas are exaggerated. So a lot of them will actually not move this part of their face, and all of their expressions are going to be in their eyes. Any little flicker or, you know, small glint and everything, like all of that is considered very elegant, very beautiful, and it's you know, portrayed in anime and manga in that way. So when you hear someone say, why is it so big? And it's like, then you can tell them, oh, well, this person said, you know, it actually has to do a lot with communication styles. Also, I kind of want to debunk one thing where they say, oh, you know, Asians have such small eyes, but then in the anime, there's big eyes. So I'll talk about that. That's the uncomfortable part that I was a little worried about talking about today. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for this. So, if we think about a Western facial structure, so here is the eye, right, for a Western face. I know I'm drawing it in manga style, so it's gonna look whatever, but, and then we have kind of the double lid, right? And then we'll have the brow bone, which is quite prominent, and actually it casts a shadow over the whole eye here. When you have an Asian eye, typically, especially if it's a monolid, you'll have a brow bone, but there will be little shadow casting from the brow bone over this eye. And then also, this lid here, this area, the upper lid, is going to have a little bit, like structurally more fat on the upper lid than, let's say, a Western structural face. And this is just for East Asian, because we do know Southeast Asians really have prominent eyebrow bones too. But since, you know, manga originated from Japan, a lot of it again is going to kind of reflect a lot of that. So you'll have this, and then since you have a more fatty upper eyelid, they kind of exaggerate the shadow that is casted over the eye. Asians actually believe the shadow is very beautiful, and that's why there's a difference between the way anime is drawn and the way a lot of Pixar animations that you'll see. And so, any questions before we move on? No? Are you guys wowed? I'm hoping I'm wowing you.
I would say you are.
So, yeah, I've had a lot of people walk up to me recently in this past year, because I'm very, I wouldn't say it's modest, more like terrified of talking about myself, so right now it's very terrifying for me. But usually I've had friends for years who had actually no idea that I'm a full-time comic artist, and so recently some of them have found out because I've been making some art for I love to make art and donate my time to like local nonprofits and everything, and so recently some of the art that I made for the last nonprofit got a little bit of attention, and then I've had people poking me, being like, hey, where did you learn how to draw? And then I had to reveal, you know, I draw comics. And then the second question is always like, why are anime eyes so big? So I've had a lot of time to think about this before this. And I didn't realize too, as an Asian myself, and with fatty upper eyelids and a non-prominent brow bone, that this is something that I guess people don't really think about. Even Asians, like we don't think about it that much either. So, moving on, I also wanted to talk about kind of my characters. Usually when I do this workshop, I never talk about my comic. I never mention that I have a comic. I don't even show my art. So, we're trying new things today. So this is the main character of my comic, Half of the Crown. So I named her Penny as a nickname, but I'm not great at naming characters. Her name is Pencil, because I really like pencils. But we can't just have people yelling pencil all the time. It's supposed to be an action comic. I feel like that would make it a little bit uncool. So I nicknamed her Penny. Chu I took from the last name because Penny's mom is Filipino, and I took that last name from one of my favorite Filipino actresses, Kim Chu. If you guys know her, I think she's really cute. Anyway, you can look her up on Instagram. She looks amazing. And also, like, Kim Chu usually has a very outgoing, very bubbly personality, but Pencil is very reserved, and she's kind of quiet and shy, and so I thought that would be a good contrast there. I like to do things that are kind of, opposite of what they're supposed to be, and this is kind of one way that I did that. So she is a little bit taller than me, which is not an accomplishment, but I just thought, again, have to make her a little bit different, or more different than me. And then we'll go to, if it will let me go back. Oh no, yeah, it died on me. Okay, hold on. Let's try it again. You can see, let's try. So moving on, we're going to find Issei. Ooh, no, that's not what I did. That is, there you go. Okay. Let's do that. Issei. So here's Issei's, and I think I'm just gonna go, hopefully this is Mr. Lee. A lot of this art I made a while ago. So a lot of the art that you'll see me selling downstairs, or upstairs I should say, looks a lot different than this art. It's very noticeable. And then, that's, yes, I am looking at this and cringing now, as artists do, right? Something you made 2 months ago, you're like, oh, why did I make those choices? So I'm having those feelings right now. But I heard from a lot of readers, from most readers, that they love that they see a difference, because it kind of gives them a rewarding feeling, a feeling like, well, I've been keeping up with you, so I noticed those changes. And so I think, that's kind of encouragement to embrace that you have gone through changes. And it's kind of nice, I guess, and if you want to romanticize it, to kind of have proof that you are improving, and not just kind of stuck in your head of just like, I suck, and so that's what I'm trying to feel right now at this moment. But for these characters, they all have different heights. Oh gosh, it would have been better if they were all right next to each other. Brooke is very, very tiny. She is much shorter than I. And she is part Taiwanese, so I don't think a lot of people understand that women in East Asia, or just in most Asian countries, are quite tiny. So I'm 5'1". And I am average height in Japan. So that means half of the women that I see are shorter than me, and then the other half are either my height or taller. So although some people were a little uncomfortable about how small she was, this is still a normal height over there, and that's kind of what I also wanted to preserve. A lot of my characters do have, like, some Asian descent. So she is specifically Taiwanese and Mexican, so that's her right there. And then Issei is full Japanese, Mr. Lee is Korean, Penny is Filipino and Black, and Raphael is, we'll discuss that later, that's a spoiler, okay? Walter is German. All right, so moving on from that, I wanted to give a little bit, and please bear with me because I am not used to using Procreate. I use Clip Studio at home. This is my daughter's I'm blaming everything on her right now because she's not here. This is my daughter's Procreate, and I hope that I don't show all of the other art. That's what the one thing that she asked me to do. So if that happens accidentally, that never happened, okay? Just don't tell her. That's gonna be okay. So for me, faces are pretty difficult, I think, especially if you want it to get to look authentically from kind of a manga style. And there's all this debate that if you draw manga and you're not Japanese or you're not Asian, then it's not really manga. We don't understand where that comes from. Actually, even manga creators in Japan don't understand why we as Americans are doing that to ourselves. So don't do that. If you are drawing in manga style that is considered manga, they will consider it manga too. And this is just the way that I do it. Of course, there are different ways to do it, but I am not good at getting everything on the first try. So sometimes I do use guides, and I'm going to show you some of the guides that I use very, very loosely. And I'm so sorry, I tried to figure out where I learned this from, because I learned it a few years ago, but I call it the paper method. So I think I learned it from a YouTube video, so if you guys find it, know that they're the original person that came up with this, not me. So this would be kind of the face, the structure of the face here. See how sketchy I am? So if you want to have the person look in a specific direction, so let's say we want the person looking upwards at an angle, think of a piece of paper in a 3D space, and it would be like this. I'm going to zoom in here. For me, I cannot really have the structure of the rest of the face without inserting the angle of the nose. I don't know why, my brain works that way. So I'm just going to roughly sketch in, and then I started doing this recently because I noticed that I'm not very good about putting in the eyes. And if you are doing this traditionally, use a light box. They have a lot of really cheap LED pads, and it works exactly the same way. You don't need to have like a fancy iPad or like, do this digitally. Oh. All right. So I'm going to lower the opacity on this one a little bit. So if you had used it as a light box, basically, essentially, I put another paper on top of this, and this is where I'll usually go in, oops, and put the angle of eyes. It's a little bit easier this way. I usually give them little nya-nya mouths, so. Okay, I'm gonna go back to a different angle. Again, I don't really know how to use this, I'm sorry. Okay, so we'll have them make this one a little bit bigger. So again, I start with the nose. I don't like that, hold on. And put in the guide for the eyes. Back to this one. I'm trying to have a less prominent underlid, just to test out. I'm just messing around with my style recently to see how that would look. That sounded very satisfying, by the way. ASMR for free.
Allergy season.
Yeah, my allergies are really, really bad. So I'm on a lot of allergy medicine right now, which means I'm very, very dehydrated. Thank you so much for the water. If you want the rest of the head, apparently if you have a really round back of the head, you were loved very well because you were carried a lot. And if you weren't, and you have a flat back of the head, it means you were left on your back a lot. I have a flat back of the head. I know everyone's checking right now.
I actually have a dent in my head.
Wow. So as you see, like I don't follow the paper guide like to a T, but for me something clicks on like my brain that way. So a lot of people will say like draw the outline of the whole head first, and that works out for them. But this is my method, and this is what gets me there the fastest. I've tried the other, oh you should do it this way methods, and they don't work for me. I'm very dyslexic, so maybe there's something to do with that. But yeah, I would just try this out and see if it works for you. Do you have any other questions before we move on?
This is like slightly unrelated. What is
Sure.
that device you're using on the side?
Oh, thank you for asking. This is a TourBox Elite. No, this is not a sponsor. So this is a TourBox Elite Plus. It's the only one that works with your iPad Pro 2 and then also Clip Studio Paint. So since I work in Clip Studio Paint, I use this because going like this and using the hotkeys on my Cintiq really messed up my shoulders. And the thing about drawing comics is it's drawing an illustration over and over and over and over again. And then the next day you do it over and over and over again. So, doing this for 8 hours a day isn't very feasible. So I had told my lovely husband about it before Christmas, and he got it for me. We got it in January. So if you play video games, I got used to it in like a day. So it's really good. So I can rest my arm down. I don't have to work this shoulder at all. My shoulder blade really loves me for it. So thank you so much for asking. This is pricey, and I was wanting something like this for a while, and I'm glad that I was really worried that after I get this, I was like, oh, it's so much money, and I think it's about $250 or something like that. Yes?
What's the name again?
A TourBox Elite Plus. There's many TourBoxes, but this is the only one that works with your iPad and the latest Procreate, and then also Clip Studio Paint. If you do video editing, I think you can get one of the cheaper older models, which are just as good, except they just don't work with all of the programs I just mentioned. So. Yeah. Any other questions?
I will say that those TourBoxes can be pretty expensive though.
Yes.
I was looking at them earlier.
Yeah. I'm glad we saved up for it. So that would be my recommendation. Yes.
Do you stream your art?
I used to, but remember I said that I get freaked out whenever I get attention, and that was just like killing myself every time. So I kind of stopped streaming, but I am under the same name on every platform. So I may once in a blue moon just stream unannounced and everything. So, but you can see on Twitch, like Twitch, I think it's Twitch TV / and then Ro Higashi. So, yeah, I'm the only Ro Higashi. Well, there's another Rosalie Higashi, who's also a Filipino married to a Japanese person, on Facebook, and she friended me when she realized we have the same name. Ro is short for Rosalie, and at first it was fine, and then she saw my profile, and then she unfriended me after that. So she was a very, I think, evangelical woman, and I am not. So I'm Episcopalian. So, yeah. Did you have any other comments or questions that you could add to this before we move on?
No.
Oh, yeah, like spreading so much. All right, so we're good. All right, we can move on to, I guess, maybe finishing a. We can do questions and answers while I start a new one, and I'll try to do it from start to finish with the inking. And then I have not attempted coloring on this, so if I get to the coloring point, you will witness some atrocities, but that's part of the learning process, I guess. So yes, Paul here will take your questions, and I'm just gonna keep looking down, and if I can multitask and listen in, and if I have a good question, or if I have a good answer, or if he has a good answer, then we'll kind of take turns on doing that, if that's all right. So.
Great. So I'm going to start by asking y'all why you're here. How many of you are artists and looking to improve your art game? Nice. Look at that. Almost the whole room. So that's exciting. How many of you have already learned something you didn't know, even though you've been doing art for quite some time? Yeah, still almost everybody, which is amazing. I've worked with a lot of incredibly talented artists, and we don't sit around and talk a lot about how they do what they do. It's more, hey, I'm going to go do this thing that you wrote in your script. So all of what we're learning here has been new to me, from the tools to how to draw certain angles to, of course, the story about the eyes, which it is amazing how you can go through your whole life and just never think about something like that. So pretty fantastic. Is anybody here because they're just fans of Rose? All right. How many of you are now fans?
Thank you, Peter.
How many of you are now fans? All right, even better. There you go. So, does anybody have any particular questions they want to ask? It can be something for Ro, it can be something for me. Manga, superhero stuff, whatever. Yeah.
Me? Okay.
Sure.
So I'm like a lot of people, I have a 9 to 5, but I work weirder hours than that, but still. I have my own little personal comic projects, but I sort of just really struggle with maintaining the discipline. I've got a personal comic project that I've been doing for 5 years, and I've done 40 pages. And I go months without updating it, just because, aside from struggling with ADHD that I only got barely diagnosed with last year at like 35, it's just a matter of I don't I'm not good at setting times and that kind of thing for myself. Do you got either you or just advice on what do you do to kind of structure your art? Even is that even a problem for you, or something like that?
That's a great question. How many of you have a job that pays the bills that is not your art drawing hobby work? A lot of people, right? How many of you have a hard time making time for doing your creative work? There we go, everybody, right? Same here. It is one of the biggest challenges, because the way to become a professional artist or writer or any kind of creator is to make the product, right? When people talk about breaking into comics of any kind, manga or Western or otherwise, the answer is make comics. So starting somewhere and finishing something is the biggest challenge. And it's something I talk about a lot. I used to be an editor for Humanoids Publishing, and I would talk with people who were artists and they wanted to work on projects. And the number one thing that I would see would be people with this big idea. They had their Star Wars trilogy that's really just, the middle part 5, part 6, 7, and 8. Is that 4, 5, and 6? I know how numbers work. And they always had these big grand ideas, and I would say write an 8-page story. Don't tell me about the Empire versus the Rebellion. Tell me about Luke Skywalker shooting womp rats in Beggar's Canyon on Tatooine. Give me a little story with a start, a middle, and an end. So that's the number one thing, in my opinion, is if you're having a hard time making time, do small pieces. Either do a very short story, beginning, middle, and end, or do chapters. right? I'm just going to do, in the next month, I'm going to do this many pages. And you pick a number that feels realistic. And then the other thing to do, this is advice. How many of you have seen Jodorowsky's Dune? The documentary about Alejandro Jodorowsky and his never-made Dune movie. It's pretty great. I recommend it. So Alejandro Jodorowsky is a legendary creator. He did avant-garde films that like John Lennon would go out to every night because they were so crazy. And it was a big thing in the zeitgeist. Absolute genius. And I was his editor for a time. And I talked about like, I used to want to write. Then I started editing. And it's so hard to find time to write. And he said, do you brush your teeth every day? I do, by the way. Raise your hand if you brush your teeth every day. All right, I want it noted that it's the whole room. So you make it a habit, right? I literally, for 25 years, have been writing one page every day. No matter what I'm working on. Sometimes it would be like, oh, I'm writing a Hulk comic book for Marvel, and I'm doing a page of that today. And other times it would be like right now, I'm not working on anything, I'm making video games, I'm contractually not able to go sell other stuff, so I'm just working on my own stuff, but I'm always doing a page a day. And that adds up, right? If you write a page of prose a day in 350 days, so basically a year, you've got a novel. Now it might not be a great novel, it's a crappy first draft of a novel, but it's enough that you could then go back in and take it apart and make it better, right? But if you make a habit, I'm going to do something every single day, then you actually produce something and you get better and better, right? And maybe at first you just do something sketchy. Does anybody here a nerd like me paint like D&D miniatures? Anybody? A few? All right, nerds, I see you. Right? I'm not amazing, but what I do is I do kind of a first draft. I just get all the colors there on the miniature, and I know what color their shirt is, and their armor, and their sword, and their sword's handle, pommel, right? And then I go back in and I do a layer of shading, and then I go back in and I do a layer of highlights. And by the time I'm done, it looks pretty good. I'm not great, but it looks pretty good. And so you can do that. You can say, I'm just going to do my pencils today. And tomorrow I'm going to do my inks. But the trick is constantly be finishing. And the more you do it, the better you get. And once you get really good at one thing, so let's say, I don't know, you're drawing swords and sorcery kind of stuff. You get really good at dragons, now move on to horses, because horses are really hard to draw, right? But just always be getting better. It's kind of like working out, right? It's you're building those muscles. That was a long answer. I hope I didn't lose you because I know you got diagnosed recently with ADHD. Any other questions? Yes, right here.
This was a question for Ro. You were talking about the eyes.
Yes.
But I mean, also, first of all, I feel like when people are like, manga has big eyes, I'm like, there are so many styles in manga that that's just strictly not even true in practice. But I've noticed you have a particular like symbology with your nose, mouth, and ears. I was just wondering if you had an inspiration for how you kind of decided to represent nose, mouth, and ears, since we talk so much about eyes. Any like mangaka you based it on, or just has your own speed?
Yes.
You know, like I have to draw.
Yes,
characters
but
panel.
I'm a lot older than probably the people in this room, so this is
I don't know if that's
so this artist is now known for only doing kind of smut. But back then, when I was a kid, he did just a lot of shonen manga without smut. And so his name is Kentaro Yabuki. Yeah, so he's known for doing a lot of kind of etsy anime and everything. I love his art still, but yeah, I was more of a fan of, his art was very influential on me growing up. And of course I was definitely a Dragon Ball kid. When I was 8, I wanted to be Gohan, and then Gohan grew up and I was like, never mind. And then Mazukazu Katsura, he did a lot of character designs in a lot of early 2000s anime, and he is very into Batman. So he even, I don't know if you guys know, he made a comic of a girl based off of Batman, and it's named Shadow Lady. And she basically has an alter ego, which is a female sexy version of Batman. And so, yeah, I liked that one too. I hope that answers your question.
That actually made me think of something. So, character design. How many of you are designing your own characters? Okay, keep your hands up if you know about how important silhouettes are. Oh, look at that. Hands went even higher. People get it, right? But thinking about Batman, right, made me think about those ears. Now, you look at a shadow, a silhouette of Batman, and you're like, that's Batman, I know it. Or maybe it'll have the mouth like cut out, right? So it's like everything is dark and then the face is just not colored in at all, right? That's Batman. That's a great silhouette. There's an amazing panel of, how many of you are familiar with a character called Superman? All right, not everybody's raising their hands. I'm assuming you're just lazy and don't want to participate. But, right, so Superman, we all know Superman, right? Character design, that S, and that silhouette of, just him and that Superman stance with the S on the chest. And there's a great panel. There's a time when Clark Kent went public and revealed his secret identity to the whole world. Lex Luthor undid it. It's a whole thing. But there's a great panel where he's telling his editor at the Daily Planet, Perry White, like, hey, Perry, we've been friends for years. By the way, I'm actually Superman. And it's a silent page. And it's just silhouette panels of black and white. And it is Perry standing up and Clark standing across from him, and then Clark like this, and you see the S on the shirt, and then Perry sitting down, collapsed into his chair, and it is beautiful. And you can do all of that with just great character design and silhouette, right? So like, who's this?
Arsenal.
All right, so we got Hawkeye, we got Arsenal, Green Arrow, like anybody with a bow, but you get it, right? If he had that like pointy cap with a feather in it, then it's clearly like 70s Green Arrow or Robin Hood, right? And so then, who's this? Hold on, wait.
Iron Man.
Right? And the thing with the hands, that didn't even happen until the MCU. Nobody, literally in the history of comics, said, oh, repulsors are for stabilizing, but boom, it caught on, it was perfect, and now it's there forever. How many of you have characters where you feel like you have really hooked into, oh, I've got it, I've got that silhouette. Anybody who looks at this character knows exactly who they are, even if they're just a shadow. How many? Right? Not nearly as many of you. How many definitely have characters who do not fit that criteria? Right? It's hard, and it's a lot harder when you're doing, stuff that's a little more manga and less superhero-y, because superheroes, they've got certain things that you can really bring out in them. How many of y'all are familiar with the Kirby hat? Right? You're not, but you don't know that you aren't. Jack Kirby, the comic book artist, draws like helmets, right? So if you think about like Thor's helmet or Galactus's head, lots of characters have the Kirby hat, which is like just some cool like magic from the New Mutants and X-Men. Ileana Rasputin. She has a Kirby hat now that she didn't have. That's now like boom, part of her silhouette. That and her big old soul sword, which used to be a little soul sword. It was a like little skinny rapier kind of sword, and now it's like a big giant manga sword because of that influence.
Kirby, the video game character, also wears hats for superpowers.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Oh my god, I didn't think about that. That's
Think
meta.
about a video game character too.
Yeah. Kirby, the video game character, gets...
It signifies which animal he eats. So
Yeah. He gets powers from Kirby hats. I never thought about it.
Eat your vegetables.
I think it's Kirby, the video game character, is actually named after a lawyer.
I did not know that either.
Basically, Kirby's named after a guy who defended Nintendo in their previous, like Nintendo versus Universal lawsuit about Donkey Kong.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Anybody know Jack Kirby's real name, by the way? Raise your hand.
Jacob Kurtzman.
Jacob Kurtzman. Yeah, Jewish guy. Couldn't go get an advertising job because, advertising companies would be like, well, we've already got a Jew, no thank you. Or we just don't hire any at all. That was the deal for a lot of the creators of early comic books. Big part of the history. Does anybody have any other questions before I just blather on? Yes?
I've heard of like how important it is to like really study human anatomy in depth before you start drawing people. I'm curious how important that is when drawing manga specifically, or if you can kind of get by with a general idea.
So the artist, the creator of Attack on Titan kind of got by with the general idea. But that was a very unique story. Like, I don't think that anybody could really pull off what that guy did in the way that he did that. But yeah, he had very severe same face syndrome. Everybody had really big heads. He couldn't draw hands or feet. It's, I guess, similar to what people joke about Rob Liefeld. But, you know, they're both very iconic artists, and they've just kind of solidified themselves as, you know, people, icons that people kind of wish they could be like. So, gosh, that's a difficult question. I'm going to say, yeah, like, you know, anatomy has a huge part to do it. I know that you saw me sketching right now, and it looks like that I'm ignoring a lot of anime, anatomy, but I actually had to study a lot, like especially drawing men and boys was a little bit harder for me because I just drew girls over and over and over. And so for the longest time, and you'll see in, you know, the early stages of my webcomic, you'll be like, wow, those guys look really girly. And it's like, because I'm using my hands to model after. So I think it is important to diversify, and you know, I think a huge mistake that I made was that like 2 of my guy characters look way too similar in their silhouette. And I didn't notice that until I started to see readers actually confuse which one was doing what, you know, as the chapters went on. And so that's something that I'll correct later on down the line, and I'm trying to slowly incorporate differentiations with their like body types. And because even though they have different heights, again, the silhouette just looked too similar. So yeah, I'm going to say that anatomy is very important. But if you look at what I'm doing right now, it doesn't look like that it's very important. But there needs to be like a base that your brain already understands in order to just kind of ignore the base and know where to place things. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I would say, right, as much as you don't want to give yourself credit, if you look at where the nose is, where the eyes are, where the ears are, and kind of that line, my nose is way more prominent than his, but, right, you've got this, and then right back here, these, and then that straight line back, which, you know, the glasses help for me. But you look at that and you say, that's a face. And if you look at, like, just how the legs blend into the body, right, and into each other. And also there's some perspective here, right, where you can tell, like, this is where the legs are, and I can tell that's the jacket on the other side, and the arms, like, where's the elbow going relative to the chest. If you do that and you're generally right, and that's part of your style isn't super realistic, people will just be like, okay, they won't even notice it, right? But when you get somebody like Rob Liefeld, his art has so much energy to it, right? Like when the New Mutants, when he first started drawing New Mutants, it was a big deal because the New Mutants art hadn't been jumping off the page for years. And his art is full of energy, but he's self-taught. And then you look at the extremes where, like, there's the famous Captain America drawing that he does where Cap's chest, like, literally is like this shelf that you could put your cup of coffee on. Right? Like, that's just wrong. And people notice that and are like, oh my God, and it becomes an internet meme. So you can have some level of abstraction, depends on how photorealistic you're trying to be, but if you don't have those basics down, then it kind of catches people's eye, right? It's like I don't really notice that, and then I can't unsee it. Does anybody know who Shannon Doherty is? I'm aging myself with the reference from 90210. Like, I never noticed that her eyes are kind of like lopsided from each other. That's just the way her face is built. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And you don't want people doing that with your art, right? Unless that's part of your character design. That's part of why Two-Face is so great, because it is that dichotomy. Yes?
Oh, just in response to that, I would say probably if you get proportions well enough, then the specific anatomy itself isn't going to matter so much. So just like Andrew Loomis has a lot of great books on this, but like knowing sort of relative to where one thing other things are, then like the specific anatomy, like you can get away with a lot. So just proportions.
And again, I think we come back to the whole practice idea, right? I have a theory that part of why you got good basic anatomy and structure in early superhero comics was not just schooling and training. It's because these people lived in frickin' New York, right? Like they all had to work out of that office in the bullpen, and they were riding on the subway, or they were hanging out in parks. And like if you have that many people around all the time of different, races, ethnicities, body types, and you could just sit there and sketch all day long on your subway trip, like that's awesome. So if you can find a way to take time just to practice, especially not with always the same person, then I think you probably also get better at that.
I mean, you can see in her underdrawing, she's drawing the skeleton first, right? So there's like basic anatomy there.
Yeah, like the little statue dudes, right? Is there like a digital version of that? That you can just pose? Yeah, I figured there must be. Yeah, 3D models, right? But don't be Greg Land and just trace models. Yes, back there.
In the yellow, yes, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, jumping off that Greg Land thing, and like, kind of the Rob Liefeld thing, aside from Rob Liefeld being popular and like, kind of objectively being bad at art, like, I mean, the biggest thing was also that artists like him and Greg Land, they get the art in on time, and they're not difficult to work with.
Yeah, complete art is better than...
We're not here to bash artists, like generally. They've got their strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, if you turn your work in on time, like if you want to be a professional, that's the most important thing you can do, right? One of the adages as an editor is good, fast, cheap. You can only get 2, right? So if somebody's really good, but they're not fast, and you have to pay them a lot of money, that might be okay. You figure out your schedule around that. But a lot of people, they've made their living by just being pretty good, but fast enough and the right price, and they constantly have work. Yeah, did you have a question?
I have a question about writing. How much, I know you're a writer and Ro does like both writing and comics, but like how far ahead do you write, and do you like write it out for like the comic, or do you, or how much of it do you find like on the pages you're like actually drawing?
I'll do my answer first, and then I want to hear yours because I bet we both do something differently. So I'm not naturally a good writer, so I have to read books on how to do that. Save the Cat for movie theater scripts was very, very good for me. And then also, I think it's John Truby's book, The Anatomy of a Story. Yeah.
Yeah, those are great. Also, Story by Robert McKee, which is like how all screenplays are structured. On Writing by this guy named Stephen King. You may have heard of him, right? There are a lot of great books. The answer tends to be some people are what's called pantsers, which is writing by the seat of your pants. George R.R. Martin is like that, which is great until you have so much money that you're like, I don't know, right? But he like has to be in the mood and get in the vibe, and then he does brilliant stuff, but he's not planning it all out ahead. And then there's other people like Brandon Sanderson, who is very much an outliner and figures everything out in advance. And sometimes it works great, and sometimes it doesn't, and it varies, right? If you watch the show Lost, they wrote some great stuff, but they clearly did not have a long-term, like, this is definitely what things are. It was just like, more mystery, more mystery, more mystery.
Mystery box.
Right? And then you have a show like Fringe, where they clearly knew from the beginning to the end, what are they going to do? Or comics. Lock and Key is one of my favorite comics, because it is very clear that Joe Hill knew exactly what he's doing from the start to the end. So the answer, I think, can lie somewhere in the middle, which is figure out your beginning, middle, and end in general at least. Unless you're just a great pantser, then do your thing. But what I do is I figure out like what's my idea, where's it gonna end up, What are some cool things that happen in the middle? And then I go and I start writing. And like I said, with my writing a page a day, sometimes that I just come up with stuff. I'm like, this person says this to this other person, and that person raises a question, and then I'm like, well, I don't know what the answer is. How does that work in this universe? Oh, hey, what if this, right? So like literally a thing I'm working on right now has people with superpowers, and they're trying to figure out how to look inside of an object to figure out how the person who can phase through solid objects is doing stuff inside, because they can't detect their hands while they're phased. And another character has wind powers, and I was like, oh, the wind power person can see in a dark room by blowing wind through it and sensing like where the wind goes around stuff. So that's how you see inside, is you scan what's being done by the hands you can't see, by what they touch and change. I just like came up with that kind of figuring stuff out, and then you can incorporate that in. So plan some, leave space for discovery, and then you're going to have to do another draft at least to go back and fix it. Yes, right there, you had a question.
So a lot of the characters that I design are for more slice of life type settings, and a lot of them are for period settings, like 20s, 40s, 50s, where they don't have costumes, they don't have anything crazy going on, they're just kind of guys in suits, and it's really, there's not like a lot to differentiate the silhouette besides like their body types maybe. So in terms of like character design, trying to differentiate, I don't know if there's a question here so much as like a help.
So my best advice would be look at shows or actors who are in those time periods. So what you just said immediately made me think of Mad Men, right? I went to a Mad Men themed party recently, and like Roger Sterling, right? He's got the silver hair. He's always in a three-piece suit with the vest. Like that, immediately, I see silver hair and a vest, and I know that's Roger Sterling, right? Whereas Don Draper, right, if he's got the hat on, and the dark hair and that chiseled jawline, right? Like, okay, that tells me, oh, I'm looking at John Hamm, right there. And so it is figuring out and giving your character some very specific traits, so that even if they are just a couple of dudes, right, there's something about them that sets them aside. Maybe it's like a certain ring that one of them is always wearing, right?
The turtles have weapons.
The turtles, right? There you go. Give each of them a different weapon, or maybe one of them has a cane and another has an umbrella with him all the time. Right? And then some of those things can inspire something about their character, like, oh, why does this guy have a cane? What does this tell us about him and his history? And maybe that becomes something interesting. Yes?
Norman Osborn, just his waves.
Norman Osborn with that wavy hair, right? Like that Osborn hair that was never explained properly until the new animated series where they just said, oh, well, guess what? He has African heritage, and that's the hair. Yes?
So I'm a writer for a webcomic, and it's a superhero comic. And my biggest challenge for me when it comes to writing a superhero story is coming up with new villains. Just because like you have your hero and you can do whatever you want with that hero and push them forward, but creating new villains is to me like the hardest thing to do because they cannot be repeats of the one that came before. So how would one perhaps come up with new, different ways to challenge a hero?
That is one of the hardest things to do, and it tends to be either it's somebody with the same power set who's evil, or it's somebody with an opposite power set. And those are fine. One of the things I like to do is look at characters like Dr. Octopus, right? And they did a great job with it in Superior Spider-Man, where Doc Ock was in Peter's body. But really, the difference between Peter Parker and Doc Ock, both of them are science nerds. Both of them got picked on all the time. One of them said, it's up to me to help people and live up to this responsibility. And the other one said, these people are all idiots. I'm out for myself, and what can I do for me? And how can I do it? Not just do it in a way that makes me money or whatever, gives me power, but shows everybody how absolutely brilliant I am and how dumb they are. right? And if you can get to that core, like it doesn't even matter what their powers are. Doc Ock's powers are not the same as Spider-Man's, and then they're not the opposite of Spider-Man's. They're just something that challenges Spider-Man. But the core of their character and who they are, I think, is where they have the big difference. I want to give Ro some time now to talk about this art up here.
They're just floating in the air. What's up? Sorry, I saw you had a question. Is it for? It can be for him too.
It's just building off of some of the other things that people were saying, with coming up with villains, opposing philosophies, just different philosophical ideas, and just giving your villain a different philosophical take on a thing, and build off the hero's thing. Just be sure not to make them a strong hand, you know. Going to the silhouette thing, color design.
Oh yeah, color design, absolutely. Yeah.
There's been posts about people who just take like color strips of the major colors of a character, and you can figure out who the character is based on the proportion of colors in that strip.
Yeah, yeah, like you'll see a lot more purple and green for villains, for example, in superhero comics than you will for heroes, except for Hulk, who's kind of he's villain coded, right? He's a monster. Ro, what about you? Do you have anything you do in terms of color for character design?
Oh, color. Apparently with Half of the Crown, I did a lot of green. I actually based a lot of their colors because like the students have like this radiant light powers and stuff, and so they could manifest and shape their radiant light into weapons. And so they all have their specific weapons, their specific radiant color. And I based them off of different corresponding emotions that you would see like on the separate out on the tree of life. So that's what I did. That's not a villain thing, but
no, but it's character
yeah.
defining and it's coding, right? And it's
yes.
it's the Ninja Turtles, like the different mask colors
yeah.
and the different weapons.
Yeah, it's been interesting too, seeing like everybody's different, unique reiterations of how they imagine each turtle like making differences, slight differences in their faces and everything. Like for example, in the Michael Bay movies, like Raphael's huge. Like he's huge. He's like a tank, which I don't think I disagree with very much. Like you know, so yeah. For the villains, though, I am overly fascinated by people in my real life who kind of frustrate me, and I think about like I think about what would happen if someone gave them supernatural powers. Like, what would they do with it? And that's where it gets kind of fun. So maybe you can play around with that too. It'll kind of blow off some steam. But thank you so much for coming. And if you haven't received one yet, we do have some free buttons for the people who haven't gotten one. But I hope that you remember what I said at the beginning, where the world needs you right now. And I hope that if I inspired you at least 1%, that's would make me very, how do you say, in English? Satisfied? That doesn't,
Grateful.
Grateful.
Thank you. And one more bit of encouragement to go to patreon.com and give a little if you've got a little in appreciation for what you learned here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.